Hi there, and welcome back to LeanReads, the channel where we share powerful insights and personal growth lessons through great books. If you enjoy what you hear and want to dive deeper, we've included a link to the book in the description below. Now, let's get started. On War, 1832 is one of the most influential works ever written on the nature of warfare. In this landmark book, Carl von Clausewitz examines the reasons why nations go to war, how they conduct it, and what deeper forces drive conflict between societies. Although written nearly 2 centuries ago, On War remains a timeless and foundational text for understanding both historical and modern warfare. Clausewitz's insights into human motivation, politics, and the psychology of conflict continue to shape military theory and political strategy to this day. The book explores war not merely as a clash of armies, but as a continuation of politics by other means, a profound idea that forever changed how leaders, philosophers, and strategists view the relationship between power and violence. Carl von Clausewitz was a Prussian general and a seasoned veteran of the Napoleonic Wars. He fought in several major battles, including Jena and Borodino, experiences that shaped his understanding of strategy, leadership, and human behavior in war. Drawing from years on the battlefield, Clausewitz devoted more than a decade of his life to writing on war. Tragically, he died in 1831 before completing it. The manuscript was later edited and published by his wife, Marie von Bruhl, in 1832. British philosopher Bertrand Russell once said, "War does not determine who is right, only who is left." Clausewitz's On War forces us to confront this uncomfortable truth. Even in the modern age, nations still wage war, sacrificing countless lives for causes that are often political, ideological, or personal. The book challenges readers to think deeply about the true purpose of war, the distinction between strategy and tactics, and why boldness can sometimes be both a weapon and a trap. Clausewitz doesn't offer easy answers. Instead, he teaches us to think critically, to question assumptions, and to understand that war, like politics, is ultimately a human endeavor driven by fear, ambition, and uncertainty. After reading this book, you'll understand the crucial difference between strategy and tactics, why historians and critics often misunderstand past battles, how boldness can be both a strength and a fatal weakness in war. Before we enter Clausewitz's core arguments, it helps to see how On War is structured. The work is divided into four parts: defining war, military theory, and the role of critique, strategy, and tactics. What is war? For Clausewitz, war is essentially a duel writ large. Think of it as wrestling between two organized wills, each attempting to throw the other and compel submission. The immediate aim is to render the enemy incapable of resistance. In classical warfare, that meant disarming him. How is that aim achieved? Through physical force. Today, we speak of culture wars and information warfare. But in Clausewitz's early 19th century context, war meant violence between regular armies on a battlefield. Material power is the instrument chosen to realize political will, morality, restraint, and the logic of escalation. Clausewitz tackles the moral discomfort head on. If violence is unavoidable, how much violence is enough? He warns against the fashionable ideal of limited force, used delicately to win with minimal bloodshed. If the political aim is to break the enemy's capacity and will to resist, then in pure theory, the only coherent method is the maximum possible use of force. Half measures tend to prolong war, invite counterblows, and backfire. War, however, is not a single battle or isolated event. It is a reciprocal sequence of actions and counteractions. Each side adjusts to the other, which typically produces escalation, from political dispute to mobilization to open hostilities, until one side is compelled to submit. Importantly, outcomes are never absolute. Today's surrender can be tomorrow's resurgence. Defeat may breed rage, and moral forces like indignation and national spirit can become decisive sources of strength. Underestimating these immaterial factors is a strategic error. The fog of war and why maximum effort matters. Clausewitz popularizes the idea later labeled the fog of war. In real war, perfect information is impossible. No commander knows the enemy's full strength, dispositions, or reserves. Decisions are made under uncertainty. Precisely because of that uncertainty, Clausewitz argues, one must be prepared for maximum effort to bring every available advantage to bear rather than rely on optimistic assumptions. Prudence in war does not mean timidity, it means resolute adequacy in the face of the unknown. What makes a great commander? Lack of complete information shapes the qualities of military genius. Intelligence and insight into human behavior are essential, but not sufficient. The great commander must also endure danger, hardship, loss, and friction, the inevitable companions of war. Clausewitz calls war a grand enterprise against the unexpected. Therefore, courage is foundational in two senses: physical courage, to face lethal danger alongside one's troops; moral courage, to accept the ethical burden of grave decisions, orders that may cost many lives, sometimes of one's own soldiers. Add to that the need for steadfastness and composure under pressure, coupled with the readiness to act swiftly and boldly when chance opens a window. In short, a great commander needs a firm, disciplined mind. War brings danger, suffering, luck, and incomplete information, forces that cloud judgment and tempt hesitation. Yet the ends of war are simple: to compel the enemy's will, while the means are difficult. Bridging that gap is the commander's art. Clausewitz begins by asking a hard question. Can there be a general theory of war, a set of rules that reliably guides commanders to victory? War is saturated with chance, friction, and incomplete information. No formula can master it. Yet some parts of war are amenable to theory. Tactics, where theory can teach. For Clausewitz, tactics cover everything that prepares and conducts individual engagements. Training, drill, marching, and encampment practices, fire discipline, formations, logistics at the unit level, the practical science of making troops ready and effective. Because these activities repeat and can be standardized, theory is useful here. You can codify best practices, test them, refine them. In this sense, tactics resembles a science. Strategy, the art of fitting means to ends. A mid-flux strategy, by contrast, is the use of engagements to achieve the war's political aims. It weaves separate battles and decisions into a changing whole. Here, rules often break on contact with reality. You may lay down guidelines when cavalry tends to be decisive, when to avoid divided lines of operation, but exceptions abound. The situation morphs, the enemy adapts, politics intrudes. Hence, strategy is an art, judgment, timing, imagination. War is not an isolated event. It is a reciprocal series of actions and counteractions. Every decision is conditioned by what came before and will reshape what comes after. The critic's trap, hindsight, without context. Clausewitz warns against critics who turn past campaigns into timeless rules by cherry-picking Napoleon or Frederick the Great. Looking backward, we possess perfect information and the outcome, so it is easy to say, Bonaparte should have done X, but real commanders decide under uncertainty, with politics, morale, supply, weather, and prior moves all constraining choice. Analysis that treats a single battle in isolation, stripped of its diplomatic context and the chain of prior decisions, misleads more than it teaches. See the whole, how tactics and strategy interlock. Tactics and strategy are not rival doctrines. They are nested. Tactics win engagements by applying standardized, teachable methods. Strategy converts those engagements into political results, adjusting continuously to events. To understand a war, we now move deeper into strategy, which Clausewitz calls the true art of war. He defines it as the use of engagements for the purpose of achieving the objective of the war. In other words, strategy turns battles into instruments for ending war through victory. No universal formula for victory. There is no single strategy that fits all wars. Each must be shaped by its specific purpose, ambitious enough to be worthy, yet realistic enough to be attainable. Clausewitz praises Frederick the Great's 1760 campaign not for grand maneuvers or displays of brilliance, but because the Prussian king did exactly enough, no more, no less, to secure peace. The mark of great strategy is measured sufficiency, not excess. The foundation of success, military virtue. Even the most brilliant strategy will fail without an army grounded in what Clausewitz calls military virtue. This is more than courage. It is the passionate dedication to the profession of arms, the willingness to sacrifice self-interest, and devote one's spirit entirely to the collective purpose of the army. A soldier of military virtue knows their role and fulfills it to the utmost. Their endurance, discipline, and quiet persistence often determine the outcome of war more than any single stroke of genius. No strategy, whether conceived by Napoleon, Frederick, or Alexander the Great, could have succeeded without troops possessing this moral strength. Boldness, the soul of strategy. Great commanders share another trait: boldness. Boldness is not recklessness, it is decisive action taken when opportunity arises. To be effectively bold, a commander must detect the enemy's momentary weakness and strike before hesitation sets in. Clausewitz sees boldness as a creative act, a calculated risk that transforms uncertainty into advantage. Yet boldness without reason, or at the wrong time, leads to ruin. It is an art of timing as much as courage. The role of deception, no art of war, would be complete without deception. Clausewitz calls it the deceitful face of war. Deception works not by direct confrontation, but through manipulation and anticipation. The commander lays bait, predicts the enemy's reaction, and turns it against them. This demands a deep understanding of human nature, how opponents think, fear, and decide. One of the oldest and most effective deceptions is surprise, catching the enemy unprepared and forcing them into chaos. Interestingly, the enemy's own, because On War remained unfinished at Clausewitz's death, the final section is shorter than the rest. Here, he turns his focus from the grand architecture of war to the character of the modern battle as it appeared in the early 19th century, the nature of battle. In Clausewitz's time, armies encamped a day's march apart and met face to face on open fields. Battles typically began at dawn and ended by nightfall, when exhaustion forced both sides to rest. Night bombardments were rare. Few wanted to waste ammunition when nothing could be seen. The immediate goal of battle was simple: to destroy the enemy's army, stripping them of their ability to fight. Yet Clausewitz insists that physical destruction is only one path to victory. Breaking the enemy's spirit, their courage, confidence, and unity is often more decisive than killing or capturing them. How armies are broken victory usually follows a sequence: material losses, the attrition of men, horses, and weapons; moral losses, the erosion of morale, discipline, and confidence; collapse, the point where continued resistance feels impossible; attacks on the enemy's flanks or rear, or unexpected assaults can shatter both their formations and their will. Even night bombardments, though tactically limited, can drain morale by keeping troops tense, sleepless, and fearful. The enemy begins to crumble, not merely because of casualties, but because of psychological fatigue. The unfinished question: can there be a war without bloodshed? Clausewitz's life ended before he could complete his answer, but he left us with a haunting question: can there be a war without blood? His answer was clear: no. He wrote, "If a bloody slaughter is a horrible spectacle, then it should serve to make us respect war rather than seek to sanitize it. If we blunt our sword out of war," Clausewitz concludes, "is both simple and infinitely complex. Its aim is simple: to use force to make the enemy submit to our will. But the means are complex. Uncertainty, chance, and human emotion cloud every decision. Tactics may be taught like a science. Strategy must be practiced like an art. And no strategy succeeds without a commander of intellect and an army of endurance and spirit. Ultimately, moral collapse can be as decisive as physical defeat. A commander who knows how to exhaust both the body and the will of the enemy, while sustaining the morale of his own forces, understands the deepest truth of war. When I closed on war, I didn't just think about generals or battles. I thought about us, how easily human pride turns into conflict, how thin the line is between courage and destruction. Clausewitz teaches that victory is not only about strength or weapons, but about understanding the forces that move people, their fears, their passions, their hopes. In that sense, On War isn't a book about killing. It's a book about understanding humanity at its breaking point. And maybe, by understanding war, we might finally learn how to preserve peace.